I'd like to extend a warm welcome again this morning, and I am very excited that we are starting a new 3-week series called Simple Church. And today the message is entitled Mission as Covenant, which I changed after Kim printed the bulletin. So if you really have to have things accurate, you can scratch it out and write it in, but the title is Mission as Covenant. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the leaders of the church have been working tirelessly over the course of the last several months to lay a foundation for our church that will allow it to have a bright future for many generations to come. And it is indeed hard work, and they've done more than I could possibly list briefly this morning. But it is extremely important for you to understand the philosophy of ministry that we are using to move into the future. And in addition to several other books and blogs and articles that I have recommended to them, the primary text that we have used over the past few months has been this book called Simple Church. Now, I believe that if you are a member of this church, you are what we would say you're an investor. You've got something vested in this church, and I think that it's really, really important for you to know what's going on behind the scenes and how that is going to create changes in our shared life together going into the future. And so my hope, as quixotic as it might sound, is that everyone would go on Amazon and purchase this book and read it, because this will give you a snapshot of the philosophy of ministry or the model of ministry that we are using to build upon and the criteria that is helping us to make important decisions as we move forward. And again, the book is called Simple Church by Tom Rainer and Eric Geiger. But knowing that many of you will not purchase and read the book, or do not have time to purchase and read the book, or who don't like to read, it's really important for me to share some of the key things that we're doing. And so this morning I want to start with Mission as Covenant. And the scripture verse that was read this morning from Matthew 28 is the mission of every single Christian church. It's the mission of every group of people who claim to be a follower of Jesus. Now, this might not seem like a big deal because in many businesses and organizations, the mission statement is nothing more than an empty catchphrase. It's something that they spend a lot of times developing and writing, and then it goes into a file cabinet, and no one remembers it, and it doesn't serve any vital purpose in the life of the organization. But it should not be like this in the Christian church, because our mission is given by God as an invitation to covenant relationship. So I want to take a few moments just to look at this claim a little more carefully. First, God gives the mission through Jesus. And while a church might work really hard to re-articulate the mission in a way that fits their specific context, we have to remember that at the end of the day, we don't choose our own mission. We don't invent our own mission. It's not our job to sit around in rooms and have meetings in which we say, what do we want to do? Rather, the mission is given by God. So it is God's mission, not ours, but we are invited. Somebody say invited. We are invited to join God in what He is already doing among us. Because whether we are active, engaged, and faithful or not, God is. And God's been working since the dawn of creation. And God will continue to work, either through us or despite us. But when God gives the mission, reveals the mission in Jesus, we are given an invitation to join in what God is already doing in the world, which brings us to our second point. And that is that God not only reveals the mission in Jesus Christ, but God also invites us to be a part of it, to join his great rescue mission of the world and to play an important part in what God is trying to accomplish around us. We see this most clearly in Jesus' repeated call, "Come and follow me." You see the invitation there. Come and follow me. It comes in many different ways. Jesus says, those of you who are tired and weary and burdened, come and follow me. For my burden is easy and my yoke is light. Come and follow me. We're invited. And when we say yes, when Jesus says, will you come and follow me? And we say yes, we are saying yes to his mission, to God's mission. And we are making promises to God about how we're going to live our lives and how we're going to relate to others. And so we always have to remember that we are playing follow the leader. And the leader is not us. Jesus is the leader, and we are the followers. It is his mission that we promise to serve, not our own agenda. And then finally, God promises to give us everything that we need to accomplish our mission together, or at least a part of the mission that God has given to our church. God promises to give everything we need if we will be good stewards of the resources that he puts into our hands. And so, we have a role to play. It's not, yes, Jesus, I want to be a part of your mission, and then we pull up a lawn chair and pop some popcorn and watch what Jesus and other people are doing. We say, yes, I want to be a part of your mission, and we roll up our sleeves and lace up our boots and we get to work. Right? So when we say yes to the mission of Jesus, we are making at least two covenant promises. The first promise is something that every Christian makes, and that is to be a faithful follower of Jesus and to serve his mission by giving generously of our time, our talent, our treasure, and our witness. People say, well, what is witness? That is just you going and saying, God is doing some good things in my life, and God is doing some good things to the life of our church. Come and see what God is doing here. That's what it means to be faithful to your witness. And these are the promises that are formalized when we become official members of the church. If you join the church, at least a Methodist church, you've stood in front of the congregation, and you have entered into covenant relationship with God to be a faithful disciple of Jesus. You repent of your sin. You turn from, in the old terms, you turn away from your wicked ways, and you begin to follow Jesus. That's the promises that you're making to God. And you're also making promises to each other, in addition to God, which is to give of your time, talent, treasure, and witness. And God says, if every person who says yes to this mission will be faithful to the promises that they made when they joined the mission, then you will have everything that you need to do what I've called you to do if, and this is the second promise that is made by the leaders, if the leaders organize those resources in a way that allows us to effectively accomplish the mission. So there are the promises that all Christians make who join the church and say yes to the mission of Jesus. I'm going to give generously of my time, talent, treasure, and witness. And then there is an extra special promise that is made by the leaders of the church to organize those resources in the most effective way, to be good stewards over those things. And so, we prayerfully discern a group of leaders, and we invite them to serve in an official capacity. And then we elect them at charge conference. And then we say, we authorize you and we empower you to lead. And when they accept this responsibility, then they begin to work with the pastor to determine how to organize the resources of the church. And this requires planning. It requires study. Leaders have to read books. They have to read articles. They have to listen to podcasts. They have to go to conferences, because you can't get any new output unless you get new input. And so leaders are lifelong learners, and they pray about what they're learning. And they ask God, what is your will in this situation? This is the mission that you've given to us. How do we accomplish that? They prayerfully discern decisive decision-making. And they inspire and encourage and communicate this, giving guidance to the larger church of how best to become a disciple of Jesus. And so, in everything that the leaders are doing, and now that you know, you can hold us accountable, and everything that the leaders are doing, they're asking one fundamental question, and that is this: how should we structure the ministries of the church to accomplish our mission by facilitating spiritual transformation? And I ask, who here has experienced spiritual transformation? Some say yes, and some say, I've been coming to church a long time and I'm still waiting. But the purpose of it all is spiritual transformation, that we would be changed from the inside out, remade in the image of Jesus Christ, so that we become a mature disciple that then goes on to make other disciples. And so, this means that one of the biggest responsibilities of church leadership is to design, can somebody say design? Not program, design a simple step-by-step process that everybody can understand and everybody can follow to be spiritually transformed and to become a disciple of Jesus. And we cannot accomplish this mission unless we have such a simple step-by-step process. So it's important to note that disciples are not made haphazardly. One of my favorite quotes is, people who expect to be a Christian, or people who expect to become a disciple of Jesus by sitting in a church, have about as much chance of doing that as someone who wants to become a hen by sitting in a hen house. You don't become a Christian by putting your body in a particular space for an hour once a week. Nor are disciples, at least not mature disciples, not people that look like Jesus. You're not made by just kind of groping around in the dark and stumbling from one program and one book and one ministry to the next, thinking that eventually you're going to get the magic combination and heavens are going to open up and then you're going to be like Mother Teresa. It doesn't happen that way. In order to make a disciple, people have to be intentional. Can you say intentional? We have to be intentional and focused in our effort. And isn't that the main reason why people come to church? Or at least, isn't that the reason why people should come to church? It's because they want to be a disciple of Jesus, and they're looking for someone who has walked the path before, who will say, "Follow me, I know the way. Let me give you some clarity. Let me give you some guidance." And if you think that there's one person in the church called the pastor that is supposed to do that, then someone hasn't taught you what the church is all about, because the church is about making disciples that make more disciples. And so I ask, how many disciples have you made lately? Have If you haven't made that many, don't feel bad, because we got to equip you to do it first. But you need to know that's part of your job description. And so people are showing up on Sunday because they're hurting and they're broken and they're confused and they're looking for clarity in life. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for a solution. And those of us who are coming for the reason of celebrating God's love and joy and generosity, we have a responsibility to take someone who makes a very first time decision to follow Jesus, or makes a first decision in a very long time, and we have to say, this is the simple step-by-step process that if you will commit yourself to, can facilitate your spiritual transformation. And that's part of the job of the leaders. So if leaders will design a simple step-by-step disciple-making process that fosters and facilitates spiritual transformation, then we can pull together and we can accomplish the mission by drawing all of our resources together and focusing them on that process, and keeping it simple and keeping it easy to understand. And this is the job of the leaders. If the leaders fail in this endeavor, if they refuse to design such a process, then they not only fail you and everybody else who's coming looking for guidance and following Jesus, but they break their covenant promises made when they accepted the leadership position. They break their covenant promises to God. If you didn't know, they don't work for you, and neither do I. We work for Jesus. And our job is to help you to join us in working for Jesus. But it's not only their failure to be had if they don't do what they're supposed to do, if we do not support and encourage their work and let the leaders lead. If we are constantly asking not what does Jesus want, but what do I want, and out of that question begin to undermine and resist the changes that the leaders need to make to move us toward the mission of Jesus, then we're not only failing them by not letting the leaders lead, we are also breaking our covenant promises to God when we joined the church and said, I will give my time, talent, treasure, and witness to this process to make more and better disciples of Jesus. And so do you see how mission is a covenant? A covenant is quite simply promises made and promises kept. God makes certain promises to us. God reveals the mission. God invites us to the mission. God gives us everything we need to accomplish the mission if we will organize our resources as good stewards. Every member makes a covenant promise to serve by generously giving their time, talent, treasure, and witness. And the leaders take that vow and then add an extra vow saying, we will take responsibility for organizing the resources so that we can accomplish the mission. And it's all about God making promises to us and God and us making promises to God and others. And so our mission is an invitation into covenant relationship with God. And if we don't keep our side of the deal, we hinder the mission of Jesus in Cocoa Beach. And I don't know about you, but I don't want Jesus to say that to me when I stand before his throne. I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so, what in the world does a church look like that is not clearly focused on the mission of Jesus and who does not have a simple step-by-step process for making disciples? I want to introduce you to Buckshot Baptist Church. Buckshot Baptist Church is 47 years old, and it had its heyday about 20 years ago when the average worship attendance was about 300. But the church has slowly been declining over the course of several years, and now they're only worshiping about 75 a Sunday. The pastor and the leaders tried everything under the sun to grow this church, and nothing worked. And so they did the smart thing. They hired a capable consultant who came in to help them understand what was going on. And this is what they discovered. Number one, and these are going to be projected on the screen. In an effort to clarify their purpose, the leaders spent hours in long meetings writing all kinds of statements. They had a mission statement, a vision statement, a purpose statement, a strategy statement, a theology statement. They had more statements than anybody could keep track of, and they were so long and convoluted and complicated that no one could remember what the statements were, and because they couldn't remember the statements, people just ignored them and they became useless. They became papers in a file, and they were only pulled out when things started going wrong and the pastor or the leaders needed leverage. Don't you remember what we had in our statement? And people goes, I don't remember anything in that statement. And so practically speaking, all of these statements, even though they were efforts to clarify things, became useless. And in fact, it was not only difficult to remember these statements, but no one could figure out how they all fit together in one overarching mission. And so instead of helping clarify the purpose of the church, they just made everybody more confused. And they also, secondly, found an exhausted pastor that was really busy but not very productive. He was consumed with putting out fires, meeting with disgruntled church members, giving pastoral care, attending long administrative meetings, and dealing with staff who wouldn't get on board. And because of this, the pastor had no time to pray and discern a long-range plan that would actually help the church keep its doors open 3, 4, 5 years down the road. In fact, the pastor, the comment that he made to the consultant was, I feel like I'm running on a hamster wheel. I'm doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of activity, but I feel like all this activity, and in the midst of all of it, I'm just standing still and nothing is really changing. So he was worn out. And he began to question his call to ministry. He began to lose his passion. And he just became interested in surviving to keep his job. And the staff didn't help, because the consultants discovered, thirdly, that they had developed their own unrelated silo ministries. You guys know what a silo is? It's when people work in isolation from others and they say, this is what I like to do, this is what I'm good at, I'm the best at this, you're not, so stay out of my lane and let me do my job. And they just kind of work in isolation and in silos. Instead of working together as a staff to accomplish common goals, they worked in isolation, and even worse, they began to compete for money, volunteers, and time on the calendar. What I'm doing is more important than what everybody else is doing, and so you should announce my ministry from the pulpit 3 weeks in advance and put it in the bulletin and put it on the website and get people to come and help me recruit volunteers. And when you've got a church of 75 people and you've got a ton of ministries that are run by staff who are working in silos, you can just imagine how thin we get spread. And so there was nothing to unite their work. And like the pastor, the staff also became tired. And in this tiredness, they became territorial and defensive. And that sucked all the energy out of the place. And the lay leaders, they were good-hearted and well-meaning people, but they had no clear direction for their work. They wanted to be involved. They had time and talent and treasure and witness to give, but they didn't know exactly how to do it. And when the consultant asked the lay leaders on the church council, he took them aside privately and asked each of them by themselves, what is the most important thing at this church? Every single one of them gave a different answer. Every single one of them gave a different answer because there was nothing that was uniting their work and helping them accomplish a larger purpose. And the consultants found much anxiety over resources. This is number 5. There never seemed to be enough money and volunteers to keep doing everything that they had always done. And one reason is because the leaders lost the ability to say no. People constantly had new ideas, and they would mention it to the pastors or to our leader. And the pastor and leaders, they were just trying to keep the doors open, and because they didn't want to offend anybody, they certainly didn't want anybody to leave because they were scared to lose people, they just said yes to every idea. And there was a proliferation of ministries that were gatherings of small people based on their own special interest. The pastors and the leaders secretly hoped that maybe if we just allow people to do all the ministries that come to mind, maybe one of these will stick and turn the place around. This is called the buckshot approach to ministry. You do 100 things and maybe one thing will stick. But this led, again, to a proliferation of small ministries based on narrow special interests. They had a men's group. They had a women's group. They had a parenting group. They had a parenting for children group. They had a parenting for teen group. They had an empty nester group. They had a Bikers for Jesus group. They had a Scrapbookers for Jesus book. They had more groups than you could possibly keep track of. Even the pastor couldn't keep track of all the groups that were going on. And they were all competing for money, volunteers, participants, and time on the calendar. And again, none of these groups and classes were working toward one overarching goal. So there was a lot of busyness, lots of activity, but nothing of lasting value was happening. In the end, unbeknownst to many, was drawing near. The church just continued to decline. And it wasn't just that these unrelated special interest groups stretched the resources of the church to the breaking point, but it also stretched the 75 people who were showing up every Sunday to the breaking point as well. Most people attending the church, because it was so small, they were all friends. And everybody that had the new idea and started the new ministry was a friend of everybody else, and they felt obligated to go and support what their friend was trying to do. And so in this way, people in the church not only had 100 different ministries to choose from, but the people who came on Sunday felt obligated to go to everything. Have you ever felt that way? And when they were successful at going to everything, they became worn out. They felt like they lived at the church. Pastor jokes, I say this sometimes, we need to get you a cot in the office, right? They were always living at the church practically, and when they had to draw different boundaries and say no to things, they always felt guilty that they were letting their friends down. So people began to ask the question, what's the point of all of this? So much busyness and activity, but what is it actually accomplishing? And then finally, the consultants realized that when new people came to church looking for guidance on how to be a disciple, they didn't find it. Instead of a clear sense of direction and consistent support on their spiritual journey, they found a sea of programs in which to drown. And after trying to navigate what felt like a big tangled mess of ministries, within 1 or 2 months, they decided to go look for another church that would give them the guidance that they so desperately needed. So if we put all this together, what we see is that Buckshot Baptist Church was a small and declining group of people who were tired, exhausted, and confused. They once had a dream of becoming the church that God was calling them to be, but this dream died because no one could get a clear sense of God's mission or a clear plan for accomplishing that mission. Rather, their only hope was to pay the bills and keep the doors open so that they could keep doing what they had always done as a small group of friends. And without even realizing it, Buckshot Baptist Church stopped being a church. The consultants gave their final verdict. Within 3 years, this church will be closed if you don't change something and change it fast. What is sad, my friends, is that this story of Buckshot Baptist Church is the story of most mainline churches in America today. And so, if it's not just their problem, if there's a sense in which it's a larger problem, we need to ask the question, well, what needs to change and change fast? And the answer really is not that difficult. It's very simple, as the gospel always is. Number one, they had to rediscover the mission of Jesus. They had to seriously accept the call to follow him and wholeheartedly embrace his mission by entering into covenant relationship with him. And that meant that every member had to renew their commitment to generously give of their time, talent, treasure, and witness to serve the mission of Jesus. And it meant that the leaders had to do what they were charged to do all along: to design a simple step-by-step process that would organize all of this time, talent, treasure, and witness in a way that would allow them to accomplish their mission. Here's a really important word: together. Not the pastor, not the leaders, us. Accomplishing the mission together. And that meant that when the leaders designed the process for making disciples, every existing ministry had to be aligned, according to the consultants, had to be aligned with the mission of Jesus and the disciple-making process that the leaders developed. If a ministry did not directly support the disciple-making process, then it had to be redirected to support that process, or that ministry had to become completely self-supporting, no longer asking for or competing for time, money, participants, volunteers, and advertising. And to protect the mission and simplicity of the process, the consultant said that no new ministries, groups, classes, or projects could be started unless they were the absolute best way to help accomplish the mission in support of the process. And this meant that the leaders would have to learn, once again, how to say no, and that they would be saying no much more than they would be saying yes in an effort to simplify. And so, what is true for Buckshot Baptist Church is true for every church, including our church. If you've been here very long, you know that we've had some challenges over the years. After being here since last July, I'm beginning to get a real sense of what the challenges are. It takes a while to listen and to learn. And we, like Buckshot Baptist Church, are faced with the challenge of simplifying, of getting crystal clear on our mission and designing a simple step-by-step process that will guide the decisions that people make for Jesus on Sunday morning. We need a mission statement and a process that can become the criteria by which we make every single decision. Every single decision. So that if someone says we want to keep doing a ministry or we want to start a new ministry, the question is always, how does it accomplish our mission and how does it directly support the process of making more and better disciples? And this means that, like Buckshot Baptist Church, eventually we're going to have to stop doing a lot of things that we've always done so that we can focus on accomplishing the mission that Jesus has given to us. And this is going to require every member to be willing to make some personal sacrifices, to be willing to let go of some really good stuff that you like. But here's the good news. You have outstanding leaders at this church. And I know because I've been working with them for almost a year now. I have been a part of 3.5-hour meetings on Thursday night or Sunday morning where the leaders are trying to figure out what exactly is God calling us to do and what is the best way to organize our ministries to be able to do it. As I mentioned at the beginning of the message, they've read books and articles and blogs and listened to podcasts and watched videos. They're working really, really hard, and they have already clarified our mission. And I hope that all of you will memorize this mission and internalize it. It's very simple. It's to learn and practice the teachings of Jesus in ways that create communities of love deployed in service. That's what we are about. It's our unique articulation of the mission of every church to make more and better disciples. And they've not only clarified this mission, but they have designed a simple step-by-step process that everybody can understand and everybody can work in order to accomplish that mission together. And let me tell you, it's an incredible gift. And then finally, they have fortified themselves by renewing their faith and renewing their focus on the mission of Jesus, and they are ready to make the difficult decisions necessary to align all of our ministries around this process to accomplish the mission. And so in closing, I want to tell you that next Sunday, I'm going to explain that process. I'm going to tell you what it is, and I'm going to explain it in great detail so that every person who comes will not only understand our mission, but you will understand with clarity the purpose that the leaders have designed to help people become disciples that make disciples through spiritual transformation. So if you want to know what's going on behind the scenes at this church, I highly suggest you show up. And if you can't miss it, that you'll watch it on YouTube or listen to it on iTunes. And then the third Sunday, 2 weeks from today, I'm going to talk about what has to happen if we are going to align our ministries around this mission and focus on this process. I'm going to talk about the kind of decisions that we're going to have to make moving forward in order to make that happen. And we're only doing it for one reason. And that is because God, through Jesus, has invited us to participate in the accomplishment of His mission in this community. And that is what we're about, that's what we're called to do, and that's what we're going to do. And here's the promise. Jesus says that if you do accept the invitation to follow Him, and you take responsibility for your own spiritual growth by giving yourself fully to the ministries of the church, He says you will have life and you will have it more abundantly. And I don't know about you, but I want abundant life. I want to be able to celebrate all that God has done for me and for you, and to share in leaving a legacy for our children and our grandchildren. So I invite you to close your eyes, and I just want to leave you with a couple of questions in preparation for the next messages. And I just want you to kind of ponder these questions, not only now, but I'd like you to ponder them in the weeks to come. Is the mission of Jesus important to you? Now, that might seem like a silly question because you're sitting in church, but it is possible to come to church for a very long time and to not know the mission of Jesus or to not own the mission of Jesus, for it not to be important to you. So is the mission of Jesus important to you? Is discipleship more than just an attempt to make my life more pleasant? Or am I called to serve something bigger than myself? I want you to ask, am I willing to take responsibility for my own spiritual growth? And am I willing to help others who need guidance to become to become disciples of Jesus and to grow. And finally, I'd like you to ask yourself, is accomplishing the mission of Jesus important enough for me to make some personal sacrifices? Knowing that Jesus spared no sacrifice for me, even the sacrifice of his own life, am I willing to sacrifice for him? And if we will be faithful and serve the mission of Jesus, the promise is that we'll have a very bright future together, and we will leave an enduring legacy for our children and for our grandchildren. And if that's good news, somebody say amen.